This episode of Rhizome is brought to you in part by the Synthesis Security Group and Fuzzy Wuzzy Signal Processing, a venture of Ian Swanke. Copyright 2026. All rights reserved.
Let's just dive right into this explainer because today we are going to completely reframe everything you thought you knew about a classic tale. We all know the story of Homer's Odyssey, right? A brave hero, mythical monsters, a really, really long, exhausting boat ride home. But what if I told you the entire epic is actually about what's going on inside your own head? Seriously. Today, we're looking at this ancient text through an entirely new lens, and it's going to completely change how we understand self-mastery. So, the ancient Neoplatonic philosophers, they actually knew a secret about this famous epic. They didn't look at it as just some literal physical sea voyage. No, they saw it as a brilliant, profound psychological blueprint for conquering your own ego. And this is huge because they weren't just reading it for entertainment, they were basically reading a survival manual for the human mind. Once we start viewing the poem through this allegorical lens, that whole physical journey of dodging sea monsters and angry gods, it transforms into this deeply relatable psychological journey of navigating our own inner lives. The really crucial point here is that Odysseus's 10-year journey isn't just about a guy trying to get back to a physical house. It's actually an allegory for the conscious soul navigating the chaotic waters of emotion and the unconscious just to reclaim the pure center of the mind. Ithaca itself represents the sovereign self. It's that integrated, peaceful center of our being that we are all constantly trying to get back to when life's chaos, whether that's the stormy seas of Poseidon or, just a really chaotic Tuesday at the office, tosses us around. Now, think about the villains of the story, the suitors who took over Odysseus's house while he was gone. They actually represent parasitic ego drives and toxic habits living right inside your own mind. In the poem, there were a ridiculous 108 of these guys, living rent-free, drinking all his wine, eating his livestock. It perfectly mirrors how our own parasitic habits just drain our mental energy. When the higher will gets distracted, these base impulses just take over the whole house. And Homer didn't just pick their names at random either. They carry deep etymological roots that symbolize the exact internal psychological obstacles keeping us from self-mastery. Let's look at our first major obstacle and see how this transitions from a literal name to a deep psychological meaning. The lead suitor is Antinous. If we break down the Greek root of his name, we get anti, meaning against, and nous, meaning mind or intellect. Literally, he is the counter-mind or the totally irrational one. In your own journey of self-mastery, Antinous represents uncontrolled ego and ignorance. He's that raw impulse, that sheer arrogance we all feel sometimes, the total rejection of rational thought. When you know you shouldn't send that angry text, but you just do it anyway? Or that guy who cuts you off in traffic and flips you off? That's Antinous. He represents the primary inner flaw that absolutely must be recognized and eliminated before anything else can be achieved. Next up, we have Eurymachus, whose name reveals him as the one who battles using broad, deceitful tactics. Eurus means wide, and mache means battle. Now, unlike Antinous, who just comes at you head-on with blind rage, Eurymachus is the wide fighter. He's the part of your psyche that uses shifting agendas, playing the long game to get exactly what it wants. This brilliantly illustrates our own internal tendency to just lie to ourselves. Eurymachus is the absolute master of rationalization, duplicity, and manipulation. He represents that little voice in your head that uses false charm to evade any sort of spiritual or moral accountability. It's that part of your brain that convinces you to skip the gym for the 5th day in a row because, hey, you deserve a rest, perfectly rationalizing a bad habit and shifting the blame to your circumstances so you don't have to take responsibility. We've all been there, right? Finally, we have Amphinomus, who's caught between two conflicting rules. Amphi means around or on both sides, and nomos means law or custom. So he is the habit of moving around the law. But make no mistake here, despite the clever-sounding name, Amphinomus represents a very specific and honestly deeply tragic kind of internal flaw. He actually has a much better conscience than the others. He recognizes the wrongness of the group's actions, but he completely lacks the inner strength to just break away from the crowd. He symbolizes compromised virtue. In the epic, Odysseus actually takes pity on him and tries to warn him to leave before the slaughter begins. But Amphinomus stays out of pure peer pressure, and well, he meets his doom anyway. This is exactly what happens when comfort or social pressure keeps us bound to destruction, failing to fully commit to the truth, even when we know better. Section 1, The Soul Reclaims the Body, the Uncompromising Return of the Higher Will. Okay, so now that we've identified the toxins in the mind, the anti-mind, the rationalizer, and compromised virtue, it's time to shift gears and look at the urgent, intense purge required to take your house back. The conscious soul's return requires a really specific progression. Step 1 is the disguise. Odysseus arrives as a beggar, showing us that true self-mastery begins in unrecognized humility. I mean, the loud, arrogant ego doesn't even recognize the quiet return of the soul. Step 2 is stringing the bow. In the story, Odysseus strings his great bow and shoots an arrow cleanly through 12 axe heads. It's this incredible feat of perfect tension, strength, and alignment that literally no one else in that house could accomplish, an act only true will can achieve. And finally, step 3 is the slaughter, the uncompromising purge of those toxic habits we just discussed. Now, I really want to pause here for a second because this is just so incredibly vital. The violent slaughter of the suitors in the epic, it isn't about literal physical revenge. It's a stark psychological reminder that you absolutely cannot negotiate with your own irrational impulses. You literally cannot reason with the anti-mind. Antinous has to be the very first one struck down. When it comes to conquering our darkest, most destructive habits, ruthless elimination is the only path forward. Section 2, Penelope's mental purity, holding the center through daily rhythm. While Odysseus represents the intense, active purge of the well, his wife Penelope represents the daily hygiene of the inner sanctum. She is the pure, receptive intellect, holding the center, absolutely refusing to be wedded to base desires. Her method of survival in the epic, weaving a burial shroud by day and secretly unweaving it by night, is an absolutely brilliant metaphor for maintaining psychological purity. By doing this, she successfully fooled those 108 suitors for 3 whole years. It teaches us that resisting the mind's descent into chaos requires 2 entirely different but equally important modes of daily existence. During the day, you have the act of weaving. This means you kind of have to play along with the demands of the material world. You actively construct reality, you engage in practical work, you pay your bills, build a life, and constantly manage life's everyday distractions, the literal suitors knocking at your door. You have to weave the structure of your day with real rhythm and purpose just to survive in modern society. But then, in isolation at night, you have to practice the act of unweaving. You must intentionally detach, slowly and deliberately dissolving the ego built up during the day through deep reflection or meditation. By deconstructing the day's build, you actually prevent your mind from finalizing a false material reality. You're basically making sure that the stress, the ego, and the overwhelming demands of the day don't reach a state of permanence that would force you to permanently marry a lesser impulse. So I want to leave you with something to really chew on as we wrap up this explainer. Look inward for a second. Which of these toxic habits has usurped your inner house right now? Is it the raw, blind impulse of Antinous, the smooth, clever rationalizations of Eurymachus, or maybe the cowardly compliance of Amphinomus? Which suitor is currently eating your cattle, and what daily rhythm of weaving and unweaving are you going to practice today to finally reclaim your own Ithaca?
Now available exclusively on Amazon Kindle eBooks, Rhizome Summer 2026, A collection of essays, Rhizome Fall 2026, Book 2.